following program is intended for mature audiences.
Welcome, basically a podcast network listeners, to basically a primary show. Our coverage of election 2016, America Flips a Coin.
America flips something, all right.
I got Greg, basically a sports show, basically a football show. I've got Jack, basically a geek show, and I am Mike from...
all of the above.
Well, I'm not on the football show. But
well, you are sometimes.
I am sometimes, when the Chargers make the playoffs, which means I haven't been on the last two seasons.
We're holding out hope that you'll be back next year.
For the Los Angeles Chargers run to the Super Bowl.
You
Woo!
got it, yeah.
Yeah, that should be a fun ride into irrelevancy. But we're here to talk about politics, because every now and then Jack and I on Basically a Geek Show will delve into politics. Every now and then Greg, Zach, and myself will touch on politics on Basically a Sports Show. And the three of us actually did that aftermath of the Paris attacks back in November. So, I don't know, I guess we decided this would be a fun thing to do, to just commit a show to politics, and then we get to say screw everyone else. We don't have to get back on track to something else. We can just talk about politics.
Well, we're going to talk about the primaries and stuff, too. It's not going to be just like us bashing Republicans.
I bash both parties equally.
Yeah, me too. Well, in all seriousness, when we've talked about it before, Mike, with the Republican Party, that if they would kind of not cater so much to the far right and go back towards the middle, I think they would pick up a significant portion of very centrist Democrats and maybe Republicans that aren't quite comfortable with where the party is right now. And to me, especially with America being the way it is now, where we're, you've still got your extremes in both parties, obviously, but I think as a whole, the whole country is pretty much right down the middle, and really that group of people sitting there waiting for somebody to come and get them, and neither party seems to want to do that.
Jack and I were talking about this earlier, and I said that if the Republican Party had a socially moderate and economically conservative Republican Party, would probably win every major election in the U.S. from now till doomsday.
When you break it down, and I'm the political strategy junkie of the bunch here, what interests me the most about presidential elections is the strategy. And that end of it, I mean, I care who wins, but right now I'm just more about who does what and how. And I think if the Republicans could find a way to pick up an extra 5 to 8% of the women's vote, the Democrats, I don't know that they could win another election. It's as simple as that. If you take the women out of it and the Democratic equation, there's just no hope for the Democrats at all. It's as simple as that. Well, and that's where the Republicans need to get back on board, is with more women, I think.
Who was it? As long as the Republicans don't try to court women by running around in a pink van.
That was the Labour Party in the UK.
Yeah.
They had their pink van driving around the UK during the last election trying to court the women's vote.
I think that, I used to be registered Republican. Now I'm independent because, the Libertarian Party in the U.S. really has achieved a level of fame to warrant its own little checkbox on the registration card. So, I consider myself to be libertarian, basically. But, yeah, the Republican Party at some point, it was before George W. Bush. I mean, I know people like to blame W for everything. Even still, they like to blame him for shit. But it was happening before W, where, keeping the gays in their quote-unquote place and all this other shit began to take precedence over actually running the fucking country.
I'd say around 92.
My take on it is that it was starting to happen, and Karl Rove came along, and like a good political strategist does, he saw an opening. He saw a niche in the market that needed to be filled, and he filled it brilliantly. And that's how he got George W. Bush elected president twice. And again, I don't know that I necessarily agree with the policies that they endorsed, but my God, the strategy was brilliant.
I would say Karl Rove got George Bush elected president once. I'd say John Kerry...
John Kerry got him elected the second time.
Well, that's just true, too.
John Kerry and his...
But in fairness to John Kerry, I mean, and again, going back to the strategy that the Republicans used in that 2004 election, you had, I think, unquestionable evidence that George W. Bush did not exactly serve with honor his National Guard commitments at the time. you had John Kerry, who was in Vietnam, on the ground in Vietnam. Now, we can debate what he did over there until the cows come home, but the point remains, he was there. He was a war veteran. George W. Bush was a guy that had a questionable record with the Air National Guard, and somehow the Republicans made John Kerry look worse as a veteran than George W. Bush. And to me, that's just an amazing thing to do.
Well, I can tell you what happened there. What happened there was the whole mess with Dan Rather and CBS.
Right.
Because they ran with a story and with documents that were not properly vetted that turned out to be forgeries. And that basically nipped the whole George W. Bush's National Guard narrative in the ass, because once it came out that, maybe the story wasn't false, but the sources were, it completely took that discussion off the table. So I think, if the Democrats want to blame anyone for that, they need to blame CBS, because if CBS hadn't jumped the gun, I think the Democrats could have done a better job crafting a narrative out of Kerry's wartime service. Absolutely.
And what I think happened there in 2004 especially is that people that were against President Bush were in such a lather. They were so hell-bent and determined on taking him down at any cost that they ran with the first thing they thought would work, and instead of thinking it through, ran with that story that made Dan Rather look like an idiot, completely, like you said, killed that narrative. And they were too, it was funny, they were not near aggressive enough in the areas they needed to be in that campaign, and far too over-aggressive in the areas they should have backed off on. And I think that hurt them. It hurt them to the tune of losing the election. It was a huge strategic mistake to hang their hats on that story without doing further fact-checking on it.
The thing that kind of gets me with the current election is the fact that, a lot of the people that you're seeing kind of peeking up to the front, i.e. Trump, and even to some degree Sanders, are people that you wouldn't expect. I mean, like 15 years ago, no one in their right fucking mind would have thought Donald Trump would actually have a serious chance at getting the Republican nomination, much less the White House. But here we are. Bernie Sanders, I remember me and Mike making jokes about him years ago where he's like, hey, there's some dude in Vermont who actually says he's a socialist. Why would you ever fucking admit that in America? Are you fucking stupid?
Well.
And yet here we are with him. So... yeah, it's kind of it's almost surrealistic, and it's kind of almost spooky in a way, because you're looking at two very contrasting individuals, assuming we ended up with a Trump-Sanders matchup, which is kind of what I'm thinking we might end up with. And you're just looking at two very, very different ways there. The country just seems to be getting more polarized.
If the Democrats decide, and I think that once we get past these first couple of primaries, Sanders won New Hampshire big yesterday, which no one's surprised by that. He should have won that. He's from Vermont. New Hampshire's right next door. That's his backyard. If he doesn't win big there, then his candidacy is over. But I do think that at the end of the day, my belief is that when it comes to a presidential election, the goal in both parties is to win. It's not about policy. It's not about – I've said this time and time again. It all comes down to the product. And I don't think that the DNC sees Bernie Sanders as having a legitimate chance to win a general election. So that it's going to be interesting to me. If he keeps winning like this, you put yourself with no choice.
Well,
you can't say, okay, even though he's winning all the primaries, we're still going to nominate Hillary. You can't do that. But I do think that at the upper levels of the party, when we start getting into the big money contributions and all that, the DNC is not comfortable trying to run that guy in a general. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out as it goes forward.
Well, it is interesting to note that I'm looking at the delegate counts right now. Despite the fact that Sanders won big in New Hampshire last night, he's only sitting at 44 delegates right now.
Right.
Hillary Clinton, who barely won Iowa and who got killed in New Hampshire, is sitting at 394 delegates.
I knew she picked up super delegates out of New Hampshire, despite the fact that he beat her soundly. But
most of those are super delegates, actually. And the thing about super delegates is super delegates are not beholden to the winners of election. So what that tells me is that most of the delegates up for grabs in New Hampshire on the Democratic side who were tied to the vote obviously went Sanders' way. But all of the delegates who aren't tied to the popular vote were probably under marching orders from the DNC to go with Hillary because she is, and I know a lot of people mention how unlikable Hillary Clinton is, but she is simply more electable than Bernie Sanders in a general election because, look, and I don't know if he's even going to listen to this, but CCSLC member The Admiral. First of all, I'm shocked that you are a true believer in anything, to be perfectly honest.
You and me both, buddy. You and me both.
I understand what you're saying when you say that Bernie Sanders is not really a socialist and he just sort of says he is for shock value. And if you look at his record, he's not, at least not what would he's not really a true blue socialist in the broader sense of what socialism means. But he still embraces the term to the point where whoever the Republican nominee has to be, if they're going up against Sanders in the general election, all they need to do is put that clip of Bernie Sanders calling himself a socialist on TV.
And do you think?
I don't think it matters.
Go ahead, Jack. Go ahead. What are you going to say?
I don't think it'll matter. Okay, even if the RNC does end up slamming Sanders or someone else slamming him with this clip of him saying, yeah, socialist, I don't think it'll fucking matter. Because think back to Obama and McCain, where, Obama said, remember Joe the plumber, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I just want to, I just think people should spread the wealth around.
Yeah.
And then John McCain just fucking hammered him on that. Well, that's the very definition of socialism right there. And it didn't matter. Obama ended up winning. But
Obama didn't come out and say, I am a socialist, which is one element that you got to take into account there. And the second thing, too, and I know a lot of people, and you refer to the Admiral, Mike. I'm going to use him again as a good example here. He's looking at this at the Sanders campaign as another insurgent campaign like Obama was in 2008 when we all thought that time around that Hillary was going to be coronated queen and move forward. The difference in this is that with Obama, the DNC saw it. They said, you know what? We can score huge in the minority vote with this guy. He's going to bring out a big enough portion of the youth vote to make it worth our while to chase them, and we can win a general election with this guy. That's the key difference between the insurgent Obama campaign of 2008 and the insurgent Bernie Sanders campaign of 2016, to me at least. And I think that's where you've got to understand. And again, like you're right about the socialist thing. If I'm a Republican strategist, every ad I run is going to have Bernie Sanders and socialists in it somewhere because that will scare the hell out of the moderates. And that's what you're trying to do. And you're right about the superdelegates, too. I was going to call them, they are the DNC's insurance policy. They're the people that are there to make sure that no matter what happens, we still get the candidate we think can win an election. I think that's how I assess superdelegates, pretty much.
And going off the minority vote, the fact of the matter is Hillary Clinton polls very strongly amongst blacks and Hispanics. Bernie Sanders doesn't. Bernie Sanders came in a close second in Iowa, and he won New Hampshire. Those two states are lily white. He is polling terribly in South Carolina.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, too. You've got to remember something else. I mean, the African Americans, they loved President Clinton, just loved him to death. And I think that maybe Hillary doesn't have the same appeal to them, but she was still married to him, and they still love him. And I think in some cases that's good enough. I think it's in a lot of cases when you're looking, and I don't want to make it sound like that every voter is uninformed, but let's be honest about it. There are
most of them are.
Most of them are, and I don't mean that. I'm not pointing out any particular race. It's everybody. I don't care what color you are, but there is an element out there amongst the Democratic Party that the fact that she's Bill Clinton's wife is good enough. And I think that's carried her a lot further than people want to say it has, to be honest with you. I mean, I like her. I know she has a very low likability factor when you do polls and stuff, but I just, like I said, I think with the superdelegates, that's the insurance policy. That's to make sure that Bernie Sanders, unless he is just kicking ass like we've never seen before, does not win this nomination. Simple as that.
No, he's the superdelegates are stacking up behind Hill Dog. It's just not it's not happening for Bernie, and I clued into that in in Iowa. when it came down to 6 outstanding counties and Hillary Clinton won 6 coin tosses in a row. And
what are the odds, right?
Which
before,
to me
actually,
is the ultimate indictment of the American political process right there, when we have things being decided by coin tosses. Yeah.
Well,
saying.
You can argue, too. I mean, why in the world are Iowa and New Hampshire basically setting the stage for our presidential elections every 4 years? They are. But why?
I don't know why it is with New Hampshire, but I don't know why it is with Iowa, but I know in New Hampshire it's actually written into the state's constitution that they have to have their primary before everyone, meaning that they are legally bound to schedule theirs before anyone else. And technically Iowa doesn't count because Iowa's a caucus and not a primary.
Attention, whores.
Basically.
But they do. I mean, I think that the activists and the people that are heavily involved in the parties in New Hampshire, they take it very, very seriously, so I like that. But I'm not crazy about, like you said, Mike, a lily-white state that probably takes their primary far more seriously than they should, basically, setting policy for the rest of the campaign, which is kind of what they do in a way.
Well, New Hampshire, I don't mind necessarily, because at least there's New Hampshire isn't a heavily urbanized state, but
True.
It at least does have a bigger urban base than Iowa does. And I'm not trying to come down on rural voters. I'm just saying that the types of policies that win votes in Ohio aren't what win votes in the rest of the country. Whereas I think New Hampshire is closer to, what resonates nationally. So I think New Hampshire is a better test, than Iowa is. But because, look, on the Republican side, Iowa hasn't chosen a presidential hasn't chosen a correctly as far as the Republican presidential nominee since 2000. In 2000, they supported George Bush over John McCain. Bush went on to get the nomination. In 2008, they sided with Mike Huckabee. We all saw how that ended.
Yeah.
Now he's ripping off Adele, for his ad campaigns, and
Buy the pork chops.
They're almost as good as Pizza Farm. But in 2012, they Iowa on the GOP side backed who was it? The other jackass, Rick Santorum.
Oh my God.
So, basically what I'm saying is that you really need to be a deeply religious and shameless evangelical to win Iowa. And who won Iowa on the GOP side? Ted Cruz, who is playing dress up as a evangelical this election. So yeah, Iowa voted for who they thought was the most, quote unquote sincere Christian conservative, although there's nothing sincere about Ted Cruz, if I'm going to be perfectly honest about.
You know what I find interesting about Iowa, though, is that they seem to do better with Democrats. And they picked Obama in 2008, but what I'm saying is that they don't, you don't get some nut job, I don't know, bomb throwing liberal communists to come out of the Iowa caucuses with the lead out of the gate like you do with the Republicans in Iowa. I mean, essentially what I'm trying to say is that you don't see the Iowa caucuses sending us the left wing version of a Ted Cruz or a Mike Huckabee. Is what they're a little more centrist, I think, on the left than they are on the right over there. Is what I'm trying to say. Seems like it anyway.
Possibly, but at the same time, their track record's not spotless either. I mean, Bill Clinton in '92 came in third in Iowa, and he ended up with the nomination. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where I think Iowa just isn't. I mean, everything about Iowa is, and I don't want to say this because, again, I don't want to come down on rural voters, and I don't mean this in the sense of socially backwards, but I mean everything about the system in Iowa is backwards because it is a state that doesn't give us a decent cross-section of the United States as a whole. And the caucus system is, let's be completely honest about it, horribly outdated.
Just a little.
I mean,
just a little.
Jack said it best. You're flipping coins to decide who gets delegates. That's right. I mean, I understand at a certain point you need to make a decision, and at a certain point you need to do something to break a deadlock. But
you know what? You know what though?
You probably shouldn't embrace a system that jumps that quickly to the coin tossing alternative.
No, I mean, if you've got a deadlock, then you need to sit down, because this isn't an election. You're right; it's a caucus. You need to sit down and you need to and treat it, I guess, similarly to NFL Football Hall of Fame voting, where you sit the people down in the room and you go, okay, present your case, and we're going to vote on it. You know what I mean? If you know what I mean? I mean, there's got to be a better way than flipping a coin, because at the end of the day, and this is something that is not out of the realm of possibility, if Hillary Clinton goes on to win the presidency, you can trace it all the way back and go, what would have happened if she hadn't won those 6 coin tosses? I mean, seriously.
My theory is that Hillary's got friends in the DNC who ensured that she won those 6 coin tosses.
Well, I don't doubt it for a second. I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, I mean, we can, and I hate to keep beating up on the guy, but I think it's adorable that the admiral's still concerned about issues and all that stuff. That's really great. And, we need true believers in the world. But if you think for one second that that's what this is all about, I've got some oceanfront property I'll sell you down here in Florida. I mean, come on.
All I'm saying is that Bernie needs to get a food taster.
Probably. but we've kind of, let's talk about the Republicans for a little bit, because I think it's every bit as fascinating as what's going on in the Democratic Party right now. I mean, my God, do you guys think Donald Trump can ride this thing through to the end?
Yeah.
Really?
I don't think he will win the White House. But I think he could become the nominee.
Wow.
And I think it will be purely in spite of the Republican Party. I think they will do everything they can to fuck him up. I don't think they want him being the nominee. I think they will try at every point that they can to fuck him up and sabotage his campaign. But at the end of the day, Donald doesn't give a shit. He's funding his own campaign.
Right.
If he needs to, he has said that he will run as a third party. And I think that if he does actually do that he will still take states.
Yeah, and you know what? He will throw a big wrench into things if he runs as a third-party candidate.
Yeah, I mean at that point, it's game over.
Yeah, then you're not even looking at a person with the majority of the popular vote. I mean, it becomes a plurality at that point, like President Clinton in '92, basically.
I mean, hell, if Trump runs as a third-party candidate and he can affect it, if he can win states, as weird and as unlikely as it might be, there is a chance that under that scenario, it might actually get kicked to the House of Representatives because because if you don't win a clear majority of the Electoral College, then if no one wins a clear majority of the Electoral College, that's where it goes. So, I mean, I don't know if these numbers have changed, but I remember back in the summer when Donald Trump really started to hit his stride in terms of his campaign and his poll numbers were rising, you had people saying, I think the number was 65% of people who were supporting Trump said that they would still vote for him if he ran as a third-party candidate.
Right. Yeah.
That is a lot of people.
And that is the nightmare scenario for both parties, is for him to do that. Go ahead, Jack. I'm sorry.
No problem. I could see Trump doing very well in non-evangelical conservative states, where that religious right element isn't so heavy at play, and that includes places like Texas, Virginia, some of the South, Florida, for example. I think Trump would do very well in Florida.
He's polling very well in Florida.
And some of the more, I guess you could say, conservative-leaning states out like Midwest. I think he could potentially end up winning Iowa. Some of those places out there, that aren't. And Utah, no, forget about it. Not going to do Utah. Ultimately they would vote for him just because he's the Republican. That's how they are out there.
Right.
That big election surprise in 2012, Romney wins Utah. That was a shocker to everyone.
That was a stunner. Right? I don't think anyone saw that one coming.
News on Fox. Romney has won Utah. Really?
I remember watching the election coverage that year, and in 2012, and we're waiting. The numbers were kind of holding steady, and everyone was waiting for one of the swing states to report in because that was going to be a true test of where the night was going to go. And they're like, breaking news on Fox. I'm like, holy shit, what just happened? Did something big happen? And then they're like, Romney wins Utah.
And in other news, tomorrow is Wednesday. I mean, come on. I don't think anybody...
Conservative Mormon won Utah. Okay.
But I just, but then when you, I don't know. I mean, I didn't check. How did Rubio do yesterday in New Hampshire?
Oh, not good.
He got destroyed.
Not even double digits?
I think he got 10%.
Oh, he's still breathing. I mean, that's something.
He's still breathing, but after 24 in Iowa, so did you catch what happened in the debate, Greg?
No, I heard about it, though. I heard that they just ganged up on him and pretty much just whooped his ass all night long.
They didn't gang up on him. Chris Christie targeted him, and Chris Christie, even though he stepped out of the race today, Chris Christie single-handedly destroyed Marco Rubio's chances of becoming president, at least this year.
Well, you know what happened, don't you? Is that they went to somebody in the RNC went to Christie and said, "Look, we need you for reasons I couldn't begin to tell you, but it sounds to me like they said we need a hatchet guy. Somebody's got to take this guy out." And
I don't think so, because I was actually reading up on this today in the aftermath of it. There are a lot of bigwigs at the Republican National Committee and within the Republican Congressional Caucus who, after Rubio's strong showing in Iowa, were hoping that Rubio would continue to rise because they wanted him –
because he wasn't Trump.
They wanted him to unify the establishment Republican vote to take down Trump.
Well, go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
What ended up happening was the Republican debate just before the New Hampshire primary, which Donald Trump participated in because it was ABC and not Fox News, which is just a weird story that the Republican frontrunner hates Fox News.
I know.
Weird. But anyway, in that debate, Chris Christie basically accused Mark Rubio of being an empty suit who only spoke in 30-second sound bites, and Marco Rubio's response was to repeat the same 30-second sound bite 3 or 4 times, like in a row. Yeah. And then right after the debate, they start interviewing his campaign manager, who's flop sweating nervously on air, like, what the fuck did I just see?
I would think so, yeah.
And he's just really committed to holding Obama accountable. And then
you could hear a fucking gunshot off stage when that happened.
He sounds like he's really committed to sticking to the pre-approved script that they had for him going into the debate.
What did you say earlier, Jack, when you and I were talking about it? That he's committed to bash Obama soundbite number 1?
Yeah, exactly.
But on top of that, he then came out. It was either today. It was today. It was today he came out, and his defense was, all of us politicians just repeat a lot of stuff over and over again. It's just what we do.
It's not just me. No one has any substance.
So I'm convinced Rubio's dead in the water. Carson and Bush and Jeb Bush completely imploded in New Hampshire. They did not have good showings at all. So Rubio didn't have quite that disaster, but he did not have the great night people were expecting him to after Iowa.
Well, he came out of Iowa, with that strong third-place finish, and I thought, if he can do a good second or a very strong third, he's in this thing.
Well, the Rubio campaign had gone on record saying that their plan was strong third in Iowa, second in New Hampshire, and then shores up the anti-Trump vote and sails to the nomination after that. But he stumbled in New Hampshire. But at least he's still technically in it. If you want to talk about candidates who just – poor Jeb Bush. Did you see that? Did you see this story, Greg, where Jeb Bush had to beg one of his crowds to please clap?
Yeah, I did see him do that. And you know what? I don't really have a defense for that. I was going to say that it was just a thing where I don't think the crowd was quite in the rhythm of his timing in the speech. But I can't sit here with a straight face and say that. I think he actually had to ask a crowd to applaud for him, which that's a clip. If I'm a Democratic strategist, I'm playing that fucking thing every 5 minutes,
If I'm a Democratic strategist, though, I don't think I have to worry about that because he's not getting the nomination.
Right, which is really, I think, kind of unfortunate because I think if his name was anything else other than Bush, I think he'd be doing better because I don't think he's a bad guy. As far as a an appealing candidate from the Republican Party, to me, he's one of the better ones if you're looking for that more mainstream type of guy.
What is it, Jeb Bush? Someone revealed that Jeb Bush's campaign is spending $1 million a day to poll 3% nationally.
Where's he getting the money to do that? Is he paying it for himself or what?
He's got a lot of big money donors from the Republican establishment, a lot of big money contributors from Texas because his family's got a lot of business ties there. So he's got a lot of money. Like, he's probably the most well-funded candidate. But he's spending $1 million a day to poll 3% nationally. Jack, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you mentioned that, if someone gave you $500,000, you could probably poll better just by buying a single 30-second ad spot somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, if someone gave me $1 million to run a campaign with, because Jeb's spending $1 million a fucking day, I would go the Ross Perot route. I'd fucking buy a half hour on some, BS night on TV when there's, I'd take off like a rerun of Everyone Loves Raymond or some shit. And I'd do like the Ross Perot style infomercial. Present my case. Hey, this is what I want to do. This is blah, 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 and done. And I would probably still, even with that, get 3% of the fucking popular vote.
Was that what he got in New Hampshire, was 3%?
He got.
I think he got like 10 or 11.
He got 10 or 11 in New Hampshire, but he's polling 3% nationally.
10 or 11% coming out of New Hampshire is not bad, especially when he's not been considered a front runner all along. But but 3% nationally, that's a problem, no question about it. But here's the thing: he's got the money to stay in this thing, and really, as you get deeper and deeper into this, that becomes the all important factor. Who's got the money to hang around? So who knows?
But at the same time, though, I mean. You know who else has the money to hang around? Donald Trump. And I'm sorry, but Donald Trump has made Jeb Bush his bitch in the Republican debates. So if it comes down to just a purely war of attrition, and it comes down to Bush versus Trump purely off of money, that's not going to be a pretty outing for Jeb Bush.
Well,
your pile, Jebra.
Another thing that Trump has in his favor. What can you bring out against him that's going to make him look bad? What skeleton is in his closet that is going to knock him off his feet? I don't think there is one. I mean, is there anything we don't know about the guy? We already know. You know what I mean? There's not a what was the girl's name from the Clinton campaign the first time around?
Lewinsky?
Lewinsky. Paula Jones. Paula Jones, right? Yeah. I mean, if there is, but that's the thing. Everybody knows that Trump probably bangs supermodels and does the whole bit. So he'd be a guy that would be very tough to pull out the October surprise with, because what are you going to use? He's already said the craziest shit you can imagine in a presidential campaign. You can't tag him with anything like that.
And he wrote a children's book.
That I still don't get.
There you go, Greg.
Well, the thing about Trump, and I've heard people saying, well, he keeps saying all this crazy shit and his numbers keep going up. Well, the thing with Trump, he says the shit that a lot of us say in private to our friends and to our family or whatever. Right. He would say the shit out loud that we wouldn't say in open company because, somebody like, oh, that's racist or that's just wrong or you're a monster, blah, blah, blah. Hitler, Coco the monkey, whatever. He says the shit that we're all thinking at least some of the time, Exactly. I mean, who hasn't just looked at the fucking news of the Middle East and be like, we just need to go over there and carpet bomb the living fuck out of them?
Well, I think there are three guys in this very podcast that talked about exactly that a few months ago,
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, go on.
Trump says what we all think to some degree or another. Now, I don't agree with every single thing that he says, but I tell you why I do intend on voting for Trump is the fact that he doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't.
That's what I mean. I mean, everybody, they look at it and they go, this guy can't possibly get the nomination. I'm not necessarily ready to say that just yet. I understand that he's a frightening candidate to a lot of people because of the stuff he says and all that. We want to make him a punchline, and he's certainly provided plenty of ammunition to do that with, but I wouldn't write him off that quickly if I were other people, Well,
I have to ask you this, Greg, because Jack was telling me this last night, and I just wanted to see if it resonated with you. Jack, someone who grew up during the 80s, said it was very surreal to see Donald Trump actually being considered as a viable presidential candidate. Do you have that same surrealness?
Yes. Yeah. You got to remember, Mike, this is the guy that when I think of Donald Trump, I think of this loudmouth guy from the 80s that made a shitload of money, had no trouble flaunting it in everybody's face, and then did a reality, well, quote-unquote, reality TV show where he fired people, ran the USFL into the ground, and just like, no, it still boggles my mind, and he's ran for president, I think, every election in the last 4 or 5, I think.
He tried to get the Reform Party nomination at one point.
But he never, ever got this kind of momentum. He never got this far in it. And usually it was just basically Donald Trump being Donald Trump. Like, he doesn't really want the job. He just wants to get out there and say some crazy shit, maybe keep some other people honest, whatever. But he's going to step out of the way when the time comes. Except, guess what? This time he didn't. He's still here. And what's he polling nationally right now?
Donald Trump?
Yeah.
He's at 29.5.
Okay. And is that versus a Democrat or in the Republicans?
Oh, that's among the Republicans. He is still the top polled Republican candidate so far, with a spread of an average of 8.5 above the next competitor.
Wow, that's even outside the margin of error. I mean, he's
he's way out. The closest is Cruz at 21.0, and you got Trump at 29.5, Rubio at 17.8. Now, this is as of February 7th. So this is not including, Rubiotron 9000 glitching out on TV.
These numbers. I expect these numbers to fluctuate a bit. I wonder how Kasich's going to do.
Well, I heard Kasich did really well in New Hampshire yesterday.
He came. It's all relative. He came in second, but Trump doubled his vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he came in. Kasich came in second, which meant he came in on top of a huge logjam of people clamoring for second place.
All right.
So,
but you know what though? I mean, he didn't do jack in Iowa, if I remember right.
No, he did. Well, no, he basically wrote Iowa off, and he committed He showed up into Iowa for like one debate and then left. All that time, everyone spent campaigning in Iowa. He was he spent campaigning in New Hampshire.
So basically, yeah, he was okay. So he basically achieved his goal of, putting up a pretty good showing in New Hampshire. I don't know. I don't know much about. I mean, this is sad to say.
You're from Ohio.
I know, but you got to understand. For like the last 5 or 6 years that I lived there, I quit paying attention to anything because I just couldn't take it anymore. But I don't know. This whole thing is very interesting. I will say this, that in my lifetime, this has got to be probably the weakest field I've ever seen as far as a field of candidates goes. I mean, I don't look at anybody and go, that's the ball game right there. Like you knew it with Obama in 2008. You knew it with Reagan in the 80s. I mean, you just knew, like, that's your guy. That's who you got to beat. I don't see that person in this campaign so far. I don't see it. I don't know who that is. Maybe you guys do. I don't know.
No, I have to agree with you on that, Greg, because usually, and Mike will vouch for me on this, I can call a U.S. general election months before the nominees even start running.
Same here, and I got no idea this time around.
Yeah, I have my best guess, my speculation, but I don't have that normal gut feeling that I normally get, like before the primaries even begin, as to who it's going to end up being.
Which you know what that means. To quote Bruce Wayne from the first Batman movie, "Let's get crazy." Nuts.
Get nuts. Yes. You want to get nuts?
I mean,
come on.
Trump's probably, what's next on the agenda? South Carolina? Is that what's coming up next? Nevada, right?
South Carolina.
Nevada caucus, and then the South Carolina primary. Clinton and Trump are leading in both of those for their respective parties. So that's kind of the thing that makes me, because Hillary seems to command the super delegates right now.
Yeah.
And she's already leading in Nevada, and she's leading in South Carolina because Bernie Sanders just can't make headway into the minority vote. So that tells me that if Clinton can rattle off a win in Nevada and a win in South Carolina, she's going to get those delegates plus shore up all the superdelegate support she's going to need to win the election.
Yeah,
I mean, or at least win the Democratic nomination.
Right. That's what I think for Sanders. And yesterday, again, if you look at it on at first glance and you go, hey, huge win for him in New Hampshire. But like I said, it's his backyard. No one in the Clinton campaign is sitting around going, oh, my God, I can't believe we got our butts kicked by Bernie Sanders in New Hampshire. They all expected it. For Sanders, what he needs to do now, I don't know how important Nevada is. I don't remember it ever being this early in the primary schedule before. Maybe it always has been. I just never noticed because it's Nevada and, who gives a shit. But, South Carolina, that's where things are going to, it's going to tell the tale for Bernie Sanders. He's going to have to come in there and either win or make it very, very close. And I just don't see him doing that. And then what's he down there? Three primaries to one at that point, probably, essentially. So I just don't see how you get up off the floor from that. The money's going to start drying up, and that's where the problems start.
I mean, another thing, although it is worth noting that this election cycle is the first time that both a Hispanic and a Jew have won presidential primaries.
That's about time, huh?
Cruz, being Hispanic, won Iowa, and which
the Canadian Hispanic.
The Canadian Hispanic. He won Iowa, which is technically a caucus and not a primary, but whatever. We're splitting the difference. And then Bernie Sanders won New Hampshire, and to anyone who wants to say Barry Goldwater was half Jewish. His mother wasn't Jewish, and he wasn't a practicing Jew, so he doesn't count, even though he had a very Jewish last name. But
there you go.
Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz, okay. I want to go on a bit of a rant about Ted Cruz. But before I do that, I'm going to share with you guys, because you guys mentioned Donald Trump in the 80s, vice presidential ticket right there.
Yeah, no.
You seeing that, Craig?
Hold on.
That is from WrestleMania 4, which was held in one of Trump's resorts in New Jersey.
That's what I mean. But to go back to what I was talking about, that's you just where are you going to find the October surprise with this guy? Like if he's leading going into the month of October in the general, what do you do?
Yeah, no, exactly. You're just like, well,
here's a picture of him with Hulk Hogan, and we're like, yeah, we already knew that.
He's kind of been obnoxious in the public consciousness for 30 years now. Right? I mean, there's nothing that you can dig up against him. But
here's a picture of Donald Trump in 1987, banging two supermodels and doing coke on a yacht. Okay, we already knew that. I mean, there's just nothing there.
But okay, so Ted Cruz.
Yeah, go ahead.
The thing about Ted Cruz is that he is completely disingenuous. He is a charlatan.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, now you say, okay, he's a politician, but he's more so than others. This is a guy who saw that he was within striking distance of Trump in Iowa, said, evangelicals win Iowa, so I am going to transform myself into
praise Jesus.
Basically, every man, middle America. I'm going to turn myself into, Joe McEveryman for middle America, who goes to church every Sunday, and I'm gonna turn into the biggest evangelical you will ever see. And what's funny about that is that this is a guy who is Ivy League educated. He is a lawyer. He is a former staffer in the U.S. Supreme Court. This guy is not your middle American everyman evangelical. He is simply not that person. But he is pantomiming that because he is trying to shore up as much of the far-right Republican base, a base that cost them 2 presidential elections, by the way.
Right.
He's trying to shore that up. And the best way I can describe that is on the issue of gay marriage, because Ted Cruz has an interesting relationship with the issue of marriage equality. After the Supreme Court ruled making same-sex marriage legal in the United States, he declared that this ruling would lead to, quote, mandatory gay marriage.
I don't understand what that means, but okay.
I don't.
Right, that's what I said too. Like, does he mean that all gay people will have to get married, or that we're all going to have to marry dudes?
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, do I need to go out and find a guy to marry now to add to our family here? Is that what he means? I don't know.
He also claimed that if he were elected president, he would make fighting gay marriage a front and center issue in his presidency.
Because fuck ISIS.
Because that's the real threat to America, not the terrorists, not the terrorists or the crippling national debt, but it's the gay marriage. But,
yeah, okay, go ahead. I'll make my offer after you're done. Go ahead.
But all of that is just him pantomiming this act of being this evangelical, because after he started making these statements, some moderate Republicans were kind of going, Ted, what are you doing, buddy? Don't be that guy who cost us an election. He then said, and this was reported, that he made assurances to moderate Republican members of the Republican Congressional Caucus behind closed doors, saying he would not make gay marriage an issue, and answered straight, flat out, no, I will not make it a top 3 priority if I'm elected president. Which means he says he's going to make it a priority to shore up all those evangelical votes, but at the same time, he's telling the Republican establishment, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. It's just for show. It's just to get the votes. Ted Cruz is a charlatan who holds the people he's pandering to in utter contempt.
Well, honestly, Mike, and this is something I've never understood about the religious right, and I never will. I mean, Ted Cruz is the most obvious example of that, but they have been used and abused by every Republican candidate since chasing the religious right became a thing. Think of all the promises that have been, every Republican along the way has given them, a head nod, like, hey, we're going to do this for you, blah, 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 and none of it ever happens. And yet these morons line up election after election and get fed the same line of bullshit just to see none of it ever happen, and they jump right into bed with these guys again. And that's what I don't understand. It's bad enough that the Republican Party chases these guys. What I think was even sadder and harder to figure is why they keep coming back for more, because nothing ever happens. I haven't seen a single issue that the religious right wants addressed ever be actually taken care of, is what I'm saying. If that makes any sense.
I know. It does.
It does. Wasn't that and again, I'm trying to remember conversations from months ago, and I think this was around the time that Trump was first starting to surge in the polls, and he was actually polling ahead of Huckabee and Santorum, who are your traditional evangelical candidates. He was polling ahead of them amongst evangelicals. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jack, or anything, but I'm just sort of recalling that. Didn't you say that was because that a lot of these evangelicals are kind of waking up to the fact that, they're kind of just tired of being fed the same line over and over again?
I think it is, yeah. I mean, when Trump was, Trump kind of did his little meet and greet with the evangelicals, and he didn't pander to them. He held back, but he didn't pander to them either. It was kind of like, he was politely answering, kind of deferentially, I guess you could say. He would just say something like, well, honestly, I think that, issues of people and religion are best left between them and their God, and that's what I think about that.
Here's a picture of me with Hulk Hogan. Everyone loves the Hulkster.
Right? I mean, he didn't pander. I don't recall him making any kind of crazy promises like, we're going to go get the gays, we're going to burn the gays and all this other shit. Which is funny because, I mean, if he actually wanted to, he certainly would have said it and not cared, given all the other crazy shit he said. But no, he's just kind of like, yeah, whatever. You guys are a thing. I don't have anything against you. Let's just move on. Vote for me, please. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether he could really do anything other than that. I mean, because for him to come out and all of a sudden be, okay, I mean, for him to come out and all of a sudden be like this born-again Christian would just be about the most disingenuous thing that would have ever happened in the history of politics, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, Donald Trump doesn't strike me as the humble, humble before God type.
Yeah, he's hardly the Lord's humble servant, is he?
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know. I think Cruz just is the best example of that, because here he's caught in a bold-faced lie. On one hand, he's telling the evangelical religious right voting base, I'm gonna fight gay marriage, and then he's going to, you know, moderate Republican bigwigs in Washington saying, no, don't worry, I'm not actually gonna do any of that shit. Yeah. So it's like, and that just says to me, to a degree, that just speaks to a degree of Cruz's insincerity. I mean, whether or not Santorum and Huckabee, who were like the two big evangelical voters, whether or not they were sincere or not, I don't know. I never heard any stories of them going, you know, no, don't worry, I'm not going to be this batshit insane if I'm elected. Maybe they were sincere, I don't know. But Ted Cruz, he's just an abusive charlatan, and and it just kind of pisses me off. And obviously, I've got a lot of disagreements with the religious right policy wise, but this pisses me off just basically beyond that, because it's not even at least with someone like, say, Huckabee, you got the sense that, okay, this is a deeply religious guy and at least he's sincere. Right. This just pisses me off on Cruz's end because it's just so transparently not sincere.
Exactly. Trump could use that against him. I mean, Kasich could use that against him. I saw the links that you provided for that, and I don't understand why no one's tagging him with this at this point. Or maybe they are, and I'm just not, we're not getting the commercials for New Hampshire or South Carolina down here. Mm-hmm. Maybe they are beating him over the head with it, but I got to think that if you've got him dead to rights, basically talking out of both sides of his mouth, you got to use that to your advantage, don't you?
I think so, but then again, the only American commercials I get up here are from Detroit, which are mostly full of misery, so...
But anyway, so what do we got? We got Nevada and South Carolina coming up. You guys, what do you think? Where are we headed next?
I think my predictions are that Clinton and Trump are going to win both of those. I think New Hampshire showed that that in a state more reflective of the nation as a whole, and again, it's not a perfect situation, but I think it's more reflective than Iowa. You have the rest of the Republican field really struggling to break out of that logjam behind Trump, and so I think Trump is going to. Again, Kasich did have a good showing, and he did kind of resuscitate his campaign. But when you look at the raw numbers,
he was running until yesterday.
But again, if you look at the raw numbers, he barely got more than half of Trump's total. And so, yeah, it's a strong showing, relatively speaking, to where he was before New Hampshire, but it's still not enough to really separate him from the pack or really mark him as a strong contender. I think Trump wins Nevada. I think Trump wins South Carolina. And I think at that point, he's got enough momentum to ride this through to the nomination. And I think on the Democratic side, because Hillary has that minority vote, she's going to win Nevada, she's going to win South Carolina, and that's going to be all that she needs to convince super delegates from the DNC nationwide to jump on board, Team Hill Dog.
Right. Well, you brought up Nevada with Trump. That's a good example of a state like Jack was talking about earlier where Trump's going to do okay because it's not, you don't need the religious right type of thing where he could win a state like Nevada pretty easy in the general, I think.
Donald Trump winning in Nevada almost seems like a natural fit.
It's just I'm with you, Mike. I think that again with Sanders, and I like Bernie Sanders. I don't make it sound like I don't, but the truth is, you got to look at it from the realistic standpoint. Is that can the guy get elected? I don't think he can. And if he doesn't come out and just thump Hillary in the next 2 or 3 primaries, I can't see his money's going to start to dry up. And what does he do at that point? But I'm with you. I think that Hillary takes the next 2. I think Trump takes the next 2, and we could be looking at our general election already.
I think you guys are mostly right. I do think, though, that Bernie will close the gap a little bit on Hillary as opposed to what we're seeing in the polls right now. Because right now he's trailing her substantially in South Carolina. I think he will get out there, and I think he'll do better. I think he'll do better specifically from the youth vote. I think he will do very good with college-age kids because they're not afraid of the S word.
I will say from Canada, this has been a very interesting election to sort of observe because a lot of us Canucks don't quite know what to make out of from Donald Trump.
It's going to be a very interesting election, I think, of the whole season. So it's going to be fun to watch. All right, guys, should we wrap it up?
Sounds good.
Yep.
Okay. Well, then I guess thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Go democracy!
Vote for me in the next election, whenever that is. I promise you, it'll be the last vote you ever need to cast. Stay classy, America.